Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining, and thank you so much for participating in this live discussion. That we are going to be looking at a very interesting topic: why are Caribbean youth losing faith? Are we paying the price? Are societies paying the price? Or is the Caribbean paying the price for the lack of religiosity and spirituality in the region? Are young people, that's young Caribbean people, becoming less religious, or are they expressing faith differently? Is the decline connected to social media, globalization, or changing cultural values? Has the church lost influence among younger generations? Are families, schools, and communities playing the same role they once did? What are the consequences, positive or negative, of a more secular society? Across the Caribbean, something quiet but significant is happening. Fewer young people are going to church. Long-standing religious traditions that once shaped our families, our values, and our communities are beginning to fade with a new generation. But this raises a serious question. Why? Is this simply modernization, education, technology, and global culture reshaping beliefs? Or does it point rather to something deeper? Disillusionment with institutions, or a disconnect between the church and the realities young people face today? And even more importantly, are we paying a price for this shift? Is something being lost in the process, or are we witnessing a natural evolution of Caribbean society? This evening, we're not here to preach, we're here to think, question, and have an honest conversation. Let's get into it. Now, this is a live Q&A session. I want to hear from you. What are your thoughts, your experiences, your disagreements? Drop them in the chat. Let's have a real conversation. Let me start with a few questions, and that is how we are going to segue into this discussion. Now, we had here something coming out of UNESCO, and is something that we need to show you. They're suggesting here that CARICOM and UNICEF report Caribbean youth are worried, tired, and often alone. A regional survey of 1,500 children and young people across 17 Caribbean countries and territories paints a data-driven picture of youth mental health in 2024. More than half reported feeling down or hopeless. Many struggled to relax, and the majority did not seek professional support when they needed it. The project used a 50-question online survey informed by standard clinical screeners, that's GAD-7 for anxiety and PHQ-9 for depression. It added items on well-being, support, and demographics. Ethical safeguards included informed consent and confidentiality for participants 18 and older, and parental consent for minors. Now, respondents came from 17 countries and territories, more than ages 15 to 30. 72% identified as female, 26% as male, and 2% as other. 45% had secondary education, 37% had an undergraduate degree, and 63% were enrolled in school at the time of the survey. Employment was evenly split between employed and not employed or students. And a large share did not often feel optimistic about the future. 58%. So 58% of Caribbean, young people do not feel optimistic about the future. Many did not feel relaxed, 45%, or they had energy to spare, 51%. So that's very bad. Substantial shares reported not feeling interested in others, 42%, or close to others, 41%. Only about 4 in 10 said they frequently felt love, 39%, could make up their own minds, and 42%, or were interested in new things, 42%. Now, these are not good statistics for the Caribbean. It shows a region in which young people are detached from reality, or even if they're not detached, they don't know how to deal with realities, right? So they're often not very, very negative. Now, how can we change this situation? Now, there is, from this Peruvian Journal of Healthcare and Global Health, They're asking the question, impact of religion on mental health of Caribbean adolescents. El impacto de la región en la salud mental de los adolescentes caribeños. So this is coming from a Peruvian medical journal. And they're saying here, religion is the belief in an ever-living God that is a divine mind and will rule the universe, or is ruling the universe, and holding moral relations with mankind. Spirituality is defined as the presence of a relationship with God that affects the individual's self-worth, sense of meaning, and connectedness with others. Religion is more comprehensive than spirituality, while spirituality is a part of religion. So both are interconnected. Health has 5 dimensions of physical, mental, social, spiritual, and religious health. So oftentimes when we talk about health, we talk about physical health, but there's also mental health, there's spiritual health, there's social health, and you also have religious health. So what if we don't have one of these categories of health? Are we totally human that we should be? These are often intertwined, very close and deep relationships. Religion, the basic manifesto of life, affects both mental health and other dimensions of health. Herein we discuss impact of religion on mental health of Caribbean adolescents to attract attention to the importance of religion on adolescent health. Now, they went and they are painting this very also grim picture of what is happening here in the Caribbean in terms of the increase of mental health in our world. In fact, many of our Caribbean young people are going through severe mental health and they're not getting any help whatsoever. Now, there is also from UNESCO, they're painting the same thing, Caribbean Resilience, exploring the impact of community violence on mental health. And they're suggesting here that this report explores the critical intersection of community violence and youth mental health in the Caribbean, revealing that 71.4% of youth feel their well-being is compromised by regional insecurity. And drawing on UNESCO survey data and regional consultations, the report details how intergenerational trauma and the normalization of violence create a cycle where unaddressed mental distress often manifests as outward aggression. So we are here to discuss what is causing this rise and this sort of pervasiveness in mental health. Is it because of the economy? Is it because of the lack of political leadership, the scarcity of political leadership? Is it because we have lost faith in a being that is higher than we are? We have to explore these topics because something that we need to explore. We're here to ask the hard questions, not to create political drama as you see on other podcasts, but to ask some really serious questions in terms of what is happening in the region. You may not like it, but that is where we're heading, and our society is not asking these hard questions. Now, there is a rather interesting article that is coming from Politics and Rights Review. So we have secular people writing about these things, but we are not exploring these topics in the Caribbean as we are not from a very intellectual region. So let me just say what they have here in the journal. We have here that religion in international politics, power and influence. And they're saying here, no one with their eyes open can currently say that religion plays no role in international politics at this time. Just look at the role of Patriarch Kirill of the Russian Orthodox Church in supporting the war in Ukraine, or consider how Christian nationalists are trying to reshape the United States by influencing the Trump administration. In 2022, at one of the meetings of the group Pastors for Trump, a popular right-wing preacher maintained that the people in his movement want to establish a theocracy because they believe God should take over the government. But what do we see also in the Ukraine? A Ukrainian official told Axios that Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu ignored Zelensky's call for weeks on the issue. Approval was finally granted at the end of September. Why? Netanyahu wanted to discuss with Zelensky the matter of allowing ultra-Orthodox Israelis to make their annual pilgrimage to Uman in Ukraine. So whether we like it or not, our political leaders are trying to deny that they too are connected to their faith. Whatever their faith is, they're connected to something higher. Now, why is it that they are now trying to fool Caribbean citizens that that religion is no longer necessary? We don't have anything beyond this world. But we're hearing about AI. We're hearing about UFOs, which we'll be talking about in another conversation. But we are here now to ask some questions. So let me begin with a chat. What are your thoughts in terms of religion? Why do you think Caribbean youth are moving away from religion? I want to hear from you. I don't want this chat now to be, this is not the ordinary chat. This is something that is going to require that you use your brain. We're not here now to talk about politics, because politics is not solving the problem, right? And we have other parts of our health that we are ignoring. And if we continue to ignore it, many of us are going to suffer from severe mental health because we don't want to deal with it. Now, was it last year, there was a young lady from Jamaica who, appeared as if everything was okay. She was a Miss Beauty, and she's very educated, and eventually she took her life. And, she went on social media and she said that, everything was going haywire in her life. Nobody wanted to listen to her. And what do you turn to, or to whom do you turn when everybody has vacated, when everybody has left you? We have to look at these things because this is what is happening in the world now. Many people are facing financial distresses. They're facing rape. They're facing insecurity. Many people are losing their children. What or on whom do we rely when our world is shattered? And this is what we're here to explore in this afternoon's discussion. So the first question I'm asking you, and I want you to now to begin the chat. It's not going to be a lecture. It's going to be a discussion where you can participate and let us know what is on your mind. And the first question is, why do you think young people are now detaching themselves from religion? Do you think we're just following what the world is doing and following what our white masters do? Because they too are not interested in religion anymore. Why do you think that we have left religion, or religion is no longer playing a huge role in our lives? Let me hear. And do you believe religion is declining, or just changing into something else? Let us hear from you. Come on, let's hear from you guys. We're not here to have a chat we are here to discuss a very important matter. This is an important subject, and many of us are suffering from mental health quietly. And because we don't know what exactly is happening, we just say, oh, it's mental health, but we don't know that mental health is also connected to your physical and spiritual health. And this is what we're here to discuss. Okay, so I'm asking you the question. Do you believe religion is declining or just changing into something else? Do you think social media is now our religion? Do you think that material things are now our new religion? Do you think globalization is now the new religion? What do you think? Because many of us are facing severe mental health challenges in the Caribbean, and we suffer from it very quietly. What is your take on the matter? As you're thinking, let me just show you a brief clipping here that I'd saved some time ago, and just have your thoughts on it. Maybe we can open with that sort of clipping. Let me see where I had it here. Yeah, this is where I had it. We're going to listen to this, and then we are going to segue into our conversation. And don't be shy.
Degree to be successful. You need a degree for the college to make money. By the way, there was a time in the world when a degree increased your chances of success. That was about 70 years ago. That's not an exaggeration. Because during the industrial age, corporations would pay hardworking employees. They would pay for them to go to college so they could learn how to do management, so they wouldn't have to run the machine anymore. They could run all the people in the factory that ran the machine. In order for them to learn how to do that, they needed to go to college and get a management degree. And so what happened is, because that's what happened for Dad, he would come home and tell his kids, you make sure you study hard and get good grades, so when you graduate from high school, you can go straight to college and you can skip the factory. And so we're still singing that same tired song to our children in 2023, telling them if they go to college, they can be more successful. But the reality is, what the college wants to do is they want to make your child confused about whether they're a boy or a girl, and then on top of that, they want to convince them that God doesn't exist and that they evolved from a lower life form. And they want to unteach them all the stuff you've taught them your whole life. This is not Myron being an alarmist. I'm just telling you what I've observed. I got a good friend who lives here in Tampa. His daughter went off to college. 1 semester. Grew up in a Christian home. Like, believed in God, prayed, read the Bible, whole 9 yards, going to church, all that. 1 semester. Came home, told her dad she's an agnostic. That's their mission. 1 semester. I remember my kids used to say, Dad, I want to go to a real college. I don't want to go to a Christian college. You can go to any college you want to if you pay for it. Well, I ain't going to pay some heathen to unteach you the stuff me and your mom have been teaching you your whole life.
Yeah. So this is what he's saying, that the school system that you're sending your children to is a system that is designed to have them lose their faith. Instead of building faith, they come home losing faith. And as he's suggesting, that is an agenda. It's deliberate. It's something that they are actually indoctrinating our children to believe that they can depend on humans and humans will take care of everything. However, we are growing into a system in which humans are becoming not very dependable. As we can see, our politicians and many of our leaders are there, and what do? They indoctrinate us, they deceive us, and people are losing faith in an entire system. So to whom do we turn when all else has failed? And my first question to you is, why do you think Caribbean youth are moving away from religion, from faith? What do you think is causing that to happen? Is it the school system, as he's suggesting, which I think is larger? I'm a part of the school system, so I know that the curricula is designed intentionally to move people away from faith. I've also taught at the university level. I understand that many of our professors that they're sending your children to have lost faith. Many are very depressed. Okay, behind the scenes, you don't see what is happening, but many of them are depressed and they too are confused. Okay, but they're there to show face because that is their profession and they have to do what they have to do. Why do you think Caribbean youth are moving away from religion? What do you think? What is your thought process? I know it's a hard conversation. I know that we don't, as a region, we don't like difficult questions. We don't like things to challenge what we're hearing. We just like to know that we're following the political drama every day. And we have to sometimes stop and reflect on our mental health, right? To see what really is going, because things are going to change very rapidly. And very soon, we are the ones who are going to be alone. Wherever you are, you will be alone. And who is going to be that person that you can rely on to take care of you? You have to think about these things. You can't just wait until the things. And that's why many people are committing suicide in the region. That's why you see many young people every day and waking up to see very young people dying. They were born in the 80s, in the 90s, in the early 2000s, and they're dying. And you're asking, why is it now in recent times that we're seeing many of our young people lives just being snuffed out like that? Good evening, greetings. The educational system causes that. Yeah, because that it is. It's obviously that the education system, let me put it on the earth, is creating that. But why? Why do you think the education system is creating a reduction, minimizing faith in religion? And I'm not suggesting here a blind religion. I'm talking about an intelligent faith that can help you go through difficult things. Once in our world, in the Caribbean, people were more religious, right? And they had faith, and faith in building communities. In fact, it was more of the religious denominations, if you study back history, that you will see that developed our system of education. right? It was they who started it. The Anglican Church, the Baptist Church, right? The Presbyterian Church. These were the things. Most of our schools in the Caribbean are church-owned schools before they were, semi-taken over by the government. So we're asking and discussing right now what has caused this sort of disconnect in the region with regard to religion. Are we following the United States? And in that country, you have severe mental illness issues. And I think that we are next in the region to suffer what the United States is going through at the moment. Now, is the church failing young people or young people rejecting tradition? Is the church failing young people? And we're at a time now where many of our leaders, like the Miss Mia Motleys, they might not be religious in the traditional sense of the word, but their climate change agenda, her climate change agenda is religious, right? It's a worship of the environment. And you don't understand that even though she might not be going to church and saying hallelujah, but her climate change agenda is religious. The pandemic and the way how they dealt with the pandemic was religious, right? So what is the secular religion that is taking over our world now? And people are moving away from traditional religion because they think that that's blind religion, but yet so they're accepting a secular form of religion that is also destroying our world and destroying faith, human faith in a higher being. Instead, people are worshiping the climate change agenda, they're worshiping social media and every other thing else. But now, so we have Pedro Jamati saying, when I was going to school in the 80s, no teaching of depression or trauma existed. Right. Plus, I never heard my grandparents talk about being traumatized from slavery. And this is a good question. And it doesn't mean that they weren't traumatized. Let's be also clear, or they didn't have problems. They had problems too. The difference, Pedro, is that they were able to, rely on somebody or being higher than they are to deal with whatever traumas that they were going through. In our present world, our young people have nothing but the internet and their social media to rely on, and that is not helping them. I can go on many podcasts and talk about my political problems, right? And the drama in politics, but is that helping our citizens? When we have all of this drama, this political theater, it's not helping them. They're just following each other. They're listening to this podcast, but it's not helping them to grow. And it's not helping them to understand the root causes of our political problems. And the fact is that our politicians are not going to be able to solve the crises that we're currently going right now under, that we're facing. They are not going to be able to do that. Good evening, Marie. Thank you so much for joining. And we have Pedro saying, everyone has mental health to deal with, but mental illness seems to be taught. Well, it's taught in the sense that, do you know that even some of the theories that we learned in schools, some of these theorists were also suffering from mental health crisis. One of them is the same Karl Marx. Many people don't understand that Karl Marx, and if you read his history and his bout of serious, severe mental illness, and also his connection with the Church of the Devil, with Satanic Church. So many of these things we don't know, and people now, we begin to internalize these theorists who had severe mental health issues. Some of them even committed suicide. I think, if I'm not lying, that Karl Marx did commit suicide. No, it wasn't Karl Marx. It was actually the psychologist. What's his name again? Sigmund Freud, right? But we studied these very prominent theorists. We look at what they think the world and the meaning. They are the ones who decipher what the world is or should be, or the meanings that we should get out of life. And then we end up internalizing what they've written. They themselves were confused. They were depressed, and it passed. That spirit passes on to our minds, and people end up in severe mental illness. And we can see many people going to study, going to PhD level, and we can see that some of them left mentally ill. Right? Why? Why aren't they telling us that education should be something to stimulate the mind and empower us, or is it belittling us and destroying our mental health? These are things that we're looking at in this afternoon's program. So that you're correct. You're correct, Pedro Jamat, that it is all of us suffers from some form of mental health. Now, Annie's saying maybe we need to start teaching our youth to stop being leeches. The world owes them nothing, right? And this is a very good thing. But the fact is that the whole system is designed that, human beings are gods, right? And if they think that they are demigods, they're little gods, then are going to think that somebody owes them something. You owe them your adoration. And that is where it comes. If they understand that there's a higher being that controls them and sees what they're doing and not doing, then it might be that they will change the path on which they're walking and will say that, we don't control everything. Remember, a baby is born with that selfish nature also, wants to ensure that he or she gets the center of attention. That's what babies do. And parents have to do what? To correct them, to let them know that not everything that every time you cry for attention, you're going to get it. Because children are born, human beings are born with that tendency to think that they should get everything, right? So they're little spoiled brats, right? And parents are the ones who will have to. Good day, good afternoon, and welcome to the live. Please share the live so we can have an interesting conversation. This is not the normal conversation we're having. I want to hear from you. I want to hear your impression and the question that I'm asking. Now, educated Black Sir Hilary Beckles, them causing it. And to some extent, not only him, but the university system, as we're saying, it's a one-person system. It's a system designed to have young people lose faith in a higher being. Now, we're not saying that higher being has to be the Christian God, right? I'm saying that whether you're Rastafari or you're Hindu or you're Buddhist or whatever, the world in which we live, we have to understand that there has to be some higher being, right? We don't control everything that is down here. And that is why we're hearing UFOs and all these things, and people are telling us, and the government is brainwashing us and controlling our minds, saying that these things are going to come to destroy us. That we have John Money was a psycho too. Many of the theorists, what we study in school, whether they were in science or in philosophy or in sociology, they were nuts. They were nuts. Let's now be honest here. But the fact is that they have gotten some amount of what notoriety in terms of they're famous, but not in a very good way, right? Now, the next question is, are young Caribbean people becoming less religious, or are they expressing faith differently? Because maybe they are expressing faith differently and we're trying to, judge them, right? So are young people, why this thing went here? Are young people actually having faith, expressing faith differently? Do you think that's what is happening? And we are blaming them that they are not religious when they are religious, but religious in a different way. Let me go back up here. I wonder why this thing, let me see if I can put this in here to this. Okay. All right, let me go to my chat since I'm asking you the questions. I'm not able to go back up to the chat. I wonder what is happening here. Give me one. Sorry about that. Yeah. So John Money was psycho, and then we have here somebody saying that's federal. Mindfulness is replacing the old tradition. We're looking at, for those of you who are joining, why are Caribbean young people losing their faith, right? Losing faith, and are we paying the price for that? Okay, and this is happening worldwide, by the way, but whatever happens in the United States, we tend to follow at our own peril. Right, so this is a question we're looking at, and we're asking some question. Why are young people expressing their faith differently, and are we judging them when perhaps they see religion in a different light than how we used to view religion? Please let me know your thoughts. So, are young people, do they perceive religion differently? let me just send you my since you probably want to talk, let me just, maybe this is a talking thing, so let me send you the invitation on the screen, the invite. So those of you who want to join the chat by talking rather than by writing, because this, we have to get some answers now, because this is affecting us already. It's nothing that is going to affect us, it's affecting us, and we can see the levels of crime and violence, the destitution in the Caribbean, the sort of hopelessness, and it will increase as we see the times go by. So we have to now begin to get an understanding of what is really causing this serious lack of, optimism in the region. So I want to hear from you, right? So if you want to join us in the chatting and letting us know, what do you think? And make this less of a, lecture discussion live. Please join the chat and let me know what is happening. Okay, so I'm asking you, or should we move to another question? Let me ask you another question, so maybe you are thinking, you're reflecting on that other question. Is it that the church is failing young people, or young people rejecting tradition? Do you think the church is failing young people, just like the school and the political system? The political system, we have already discussed that the political system, politics, is failing young people. Now, is it true that the church is failing young people, and that is why they are moving away from it, and they don't want anything to do with traditional religion? And are they accepting a more modern type of religion, perhaps, that is destroying them? And by the way, when we talk about music, the Jay-Z's and the hip hop and the dancehall and all these people are involved with religion. And some of the things that they talk about in their songs are religiously inspired. Okay, it's just not in the traditional sense of the word. And their God is, who. Okay, so please understand that when you talk about Freemasonry, the Illuminati, and all these people, they have their gods, and that they worship, or political leaders, they are aligned with secret societies that are highly religious. So why are they conditioning us to be, atheistic when they are not, in the true sense of the word? Let me hear from you. I want to hear from you. I want to hear from you. Please get online and let us have this very hard discussion, and maybe uncomfortable, but something very necessary to have at this point of our lives. We're hearing about the data centers coming to Trinidad, and many of these AI things, and these are things that we can't run away from, and they're going to create less jobs, right? Many of us are going to be jobless tomorrow, right, in the future. So we've got to start thinking about, how are we going to survive? And how are we going to cope with our mental health? Are we going to become mentally ill? And we're seeing a challenge. I've read you about what is happening in the Caribbean, that many of our people are suffering from mental challenges, from mental illness. Now, let me go to Annie saying a lot of the Hollywood stars believe in Scientology. Absolutely. A lot of the people from Hollywood believe in Scientology. In fact, Scientology can be a new religion too. It's one of the new religions that many of our young people are also dabbling in. Okay, and many people, many parents, for example, will say they did not know that their son and daughter could do this or do that. But if they are dabbling in new religion because you think that, just sending them to school and sending them to practice in terms of some football practice or basketball practice, that is sufficient for their education, then you are going to cry. And many parents begin afterward, it's too late, when you realize that they're dabbling into other things because they are not fulfilled. They're losing something. And remember, we're saying now that from the medical journal, a medical journal in Peru, and not only them, science also likens health to spiritual health. So we have physical health and well-being, we have mental health and well-being, and we also have spiritual health and well-being. Okay, and what we're finding now in our society is that many people lack spiritual health and well-being. And mental, one of the things we must understand is that our physical is connected to our mental, mental connected to our spiritual. So if we do not treat them as a whole and interconnected, then what's going to happen? The entire human system fails. Okay, so sometimes we separate mental health from physical health when the two are interconnected or should be interconnected. So if your organ is not working well, or then your brain is not going to work well because your brain is connected to all of your organs. Without the brain, these organs can't work. You're going to die. Okay, so without spiritual health, also your mental health is going to be off. Okay, because when things get haywire, and even when they're not haywire yet, how do you even relax? And that's why many people have to relax through hedonistic behavior. They have to go somewhere and they have to be engaged in, illicit sexual activity and drugs. Why? Because they cannot relax. They're not in a state where they can what? Just reflect. And young people are on this constant, what you call it now, social media, surfing, and they cannot what? Feel a sense of relaxation. Something is wrong. So we go to Padre saying this is a new age where some people believe men can get pregnant, Dr. Verma. Right. And we have this sort of new philosophy. That is why we are also moving into the age where people can say there's no difference between a man and a woman. When we were living in traditional religious society, at least in the Caribbean here, we were taught, and in many other religions, it doesn't have to be Christianity, people were able to distinguish between a man and a woman. But the less religious we become, guess what happens? Man takes over that void. And whatever man tells you, whatever the science says, then you have to follow because the experts said it. The experts are now our gods. And that is why during the pandemic, you heard, listen to the experts. Don't listen to the voice of God, whatever God you serve, okay? But listen to the voice of the experts, and they will tell you what you need to do, okay? And what happened? We saw the disaster that took place. So do you think with the climate change agenda and with all of this grandiose AI data centers that go into Trinidad and whatever they're doing, do you think that they're going to solve the problems of the world? Absolutely not. In the same way that the medicine during the pandemic did not solve the health problem. It made it worse. Okay? And that's what we have to understand. Off to hope. Oh, you're going, oh, you're okay. And then we have Marie saying there are many people in church who do not reflect God's love at all. That's a very important point. They behave like academically educated savages. You're correct. It doesn't surprise me that the church is losing its place in the society. Right. Now, this is something that is true. But the same thing we can say, Marie, of the educational system, the medical system, that yes, we have to highlight its faults, but doesn't it play a role in society still? They still do. So what we need to do is to highlight, that's what we're saying here, what the problem of the church, and in fact, it is correct what you're saying, Marie, that a lot of the members of the church are sick. But we must understand too that the church is for what? Sick people. It's a hospital. It's a hospital for sick people, right? That is where we go. It's like a BAM in Gilead. Many people won't change, as many people in the hospitals won't change, because they want to do what they want to eat, and they want to live whatever life they want to live. So because humans have the freedom of choice, at least for now, then they can behave whatever they want to do in the church, and many of them are hypocrites, and you're right about that. But does it mean, therefore, that we should throw out the baby with the bathwater? Or should we try to look at how that there is something, there's an overarching, what do you call it now, system in which people can rely on to get some sort of relief for the pains that they endure? And yes, the church does play a role in terms of suggesting what are values. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's, possessions, and all the other commandments that the Bible has, all right, or religion, not only the Bible, but maybe the Quran, maybe something else that you read. It's just man's understanding that he is not limitless, and that he cannot rely on his limitations to solve everything in our current society. But what we see in our world today are men who think that they are gods. They're demigods and we should worship them. And men are literally worshiping them. When we look at the basketball players, when we look at the musicians, the Jay-Z's, these are the new the gods and goddesses that we have in the world, the Beyoncés, right? And that is why people run and they will worship them. At the same time, they're hypocrites too. But what do we prefer? Do we prefer to go into a hedonistic sort of place or venue, or do we remain in the church where we have some amount of order, some amount of rules to govern human behavior, and to understand that we are not gods, as they're telling us? Everybody's not saying that we're all gods. God is within all of us, but is that true? So the person who is committing, fornication, who is killing, right, who is stealing, that person has God in him or her too? Is that true? Well, that's what we're hearing, that we are gods. That is a new age philosophy. And the new age philosophy is religious, but it's a religion that is humanistic. And that is what we learn in school, that we have this humanistic curriculum, right? And this is what we have to fight against. You're right, Marie saying all they do, they gossip. But in some cases, you can be around the good folks. There are good folks in the church too, right? I've been to churches, and I agree with you, Marie, that there are lots of gossipers, but there are lots of people who pray for you. There are lots of people who encourage you. There are lots of people who have great Bible discussions and keep you grounded. In the same way that you can, in your medical profession, and you see what they're doing, you see how connected they are to, the drugs, but at the same time, there are good doctors, right? And you try to, keep yourself aligned with those who are decent and morally upright, and not to think the church is not. You're not going to find perfection in the church, because we're living in a sinful world. But what we can find and learn is what decency is about. We're not going to find perfection in the school, but what we want to find is that there are some good teachers who will, right, imbue a decent education onto their children. So so you're correct, Marie. All they do is gossip. And he's saying many of those stars believe in Scientology. They do. And if they believe in Scientology, and their followers, who the people who are following them, singing their music, don't you think they are going to believe in Scientology too? Yes, because the very symbols that they use on their clothes, they evoke some sort of spirits. And that's why sometimes your children are at home and they're traumatized, and you don't even know, because certain spirits are in the room. They begin to put up dark things in their room, and you're wondering, where are those things coming from? Because the music that they are listening to is channeling things to them of that realm that you are not even aware of. And then you cry. Sometimes they kill. We are hearing now frequently that young people are also killing their parents. And that's happening very regularly now. It's happening in the Caribbean, it's happening in the United States, it's happening all over the world, where you find one little young man, sometimes 14, 16, and he goes and he knives all his family members. Why are they doing that? What spirit is controlling these creatures that sometimes you bear from the room? Women, you bear, out of your womb, right? You brought them into this world, and you never taught them to kill. So where did they get that from? And these are some of the questions that we have to ask. I think we are looking at a world that we think is materialistic, and everything is materialistic, and everything is not materialistic. We have a spiritual war in which we are engaged, and our young people are in that war. And those of us who are from Generation X and the baby boomers, even though we might not have been religious in the traditional sense of the word, but we understood that our world is much more than just money and, and going on a trip and doing this and doing that, getting a degree. It was also connecting to a source that is much higher than we are. And if we think that we're just here by ourselves, now, when you look at nature, and we're talking about climate change now, we can't control nature, Nature is much bigger than us. So all they're doing and telling us that they're going to control nature and we must do this and we must stop using fossil fuels and they're going to use renewables. All of these things, they won't be able to stop the storms and the hurricanes and the earthquakes that will be coming up on us. They won't. And let us reflect too. Before Christopher Columbus came to this neck of the hemisphere, we had the Arawak Indians, right? The indigenous people who lived here. Now, were they using a lot of fossil fuel? They weren't. They were not as using lots of these things and creating wars as we see happening here in the Caribbean. And well, we're not creating wars, but they're getting our gas and and oil to create wars. Now, these indigenous people never had these things, and but they had hurricanes too. Even though they never had all these wars and they weren't using up all these fossil fuels and doing all of what they're telling us that we're doing. And they live in healthier times. And yet still, they were not able to control what the natural disasters. And in all major societies and cultures, people had their form of religious God, whether it is a Hindu, the Buddhist, what you call Krishna, all of them. You read history, you read literature, they all. Now, what is going to be our history? Those of you who have children, what is going to be your history in terms of who is greater than man and nature? Who's going to be that? Because right now our children are godless. And we leave them up to a video game, to a sports match, and we think that that is filling their void, that void. But it's not filling the void. And I'm not suggesting here that this is topic for you have to be Christian. You don't have to be Christian if you don't. But what I'm saying to you, at least people in other faiths, they do have something that they are higher being on which they can rely. But in our Caribbean now, our children are empty. Empty. Now, are we losing something important as faith declines or gaining something new? Are we losing something? And I want you to reflect on this question. Are we losing something important as faith declines or gaining something new? How are we benefiting? In fact, since we have lost religion, have we become better societies? Since you're no longer going to Sunday school or Sabbath school, as would say in the Caribbean, or wherever you go to, the mosque, right? Or the Hindu, religious center. Since we're less religious in the Caribbean, are we better? Are we evolving into better societies? A better Barbadian society, a better Jamaican society, let me know. And I want you to chat. I don't want here, because I'm here to ask you. I'm not suggesting that you have to agree with me, What we're here is to have a discussion in terms of where are we going as a region without faith. And that faith does not have to be Christianity. But can we just live unto ourselves and just rely on computer, rely on AI, rely on our politicians? And I have been on podcasts before where, don't talk about religion, yet still they're practicing voodoo. The same ones who are telling you don't talk about religion are practicing voodoo. Okay? So what is this notion that religion is not important when our politicians are using it? A lot of our podcasters are using it and they pretend as if they're not. But behind the scenes, and if you watch their lingo very well and you watch them carefully, is that what they do? The guests that they invite onto the program and what they talk about, you see that they are closely aligned with the spiritual realm. Okay? So I'm asking you guys, and this is not a hard question, is our society better now that we are less religious? Are we better off? Are we having less crime? Are we more productive? Because, back in the days, I can't remember the name of this theorist, and the sociologist, and he was actually differentiating between Catholic Europe and Protestant Europe. And he noted that most of the Protestant nations were more productive, richer, right? And while the Catholic nations were what? Poorer and less productive. Because religion matters. Religion matters. And religion shapes in terms of whether you're going to be productive or not. The mental health of the nation. Okay? It determines that too. Because as we suggested, there are three aspects of our human lives. The physical, the mental, and the spirit. Some people call it the mind, the body, and the soul. And we tend now to be placing less value on that. And even the mental health thing too, we don't place a lot of emphasis on it. When we think about health, people tend to think about, oh, do you have diabetes? Do you have kidney problems, kidney disease? Or you have whatever you have, whatever aches the body. But we talk less in the Caribbean about mental health and spiritual health and well-being. People just, oh, I'm not religious, and it means nothing. You think that is the thing to say, and it makes you look as if you're intelligent or you are more complex thinker, and you're not. Because if you don't recognize, and I'm not suggesting now that somebody should tell you who you should worship. You should be the one to read for yourselves, try to find out what is true, because no politics, right, is going to determine what is truth. Your politicians don't even speak the truth, right? So if you don't know that politics doesn't deal with truth, they deal with lies. That is what they do. That's the art of politics, is to deceive and to lie. So how are you going to decipher when your politician is moral or immoral? How are you going to decipher if an individual, your friends, right, are moral or immoral? How are you going to do that? Okay. So are we losing something important as faith declines? That's the question. But do you think strong religious values are necessary for a stable society? Do you think strong religious values are necessary for a stable society? Now, it's very sad that you're not responding. The live is not as, I know it takes some time. I know these questions require lots of time to think. But aren't we thinking about where our societies are going? Aren't we thinking about the fact that we are not connected, the values of yesteryear? I'm from Generation X, and some of you are also as well, But our society is no longer interconnected. The values that our parents had were passed on to us for the most part. But the values of our time, of our generation, really not being passed on to the next generation. And we claim that we are living in modernity. Oh, and many people are dying. And the society is much more chaotic than it was yesteryear. The Caribbean is chaotic, right? Crime and violence out of hand, a political system that doesn't work, an economic system that is out of sync with the realities of the Caribbean. We have learned that even the neoliberal system that we practice here in the Caribbean, economic, is religious. It's a religion. It's not even, the IMF is a religion. It's a religious entity. It's not an economic. It says that we should depend on the market. The government should not regulate the economy and regulate these, private corporations. And we just blindly follow this model and saying, this is how it is. And these people are not religious. They're just some economists. Are they really? Right? You're blindly believing in a market and that a market is going to control your economy? Or shouldn't you have rules to control your economy? Yet they're telling us, oh, we're going to grow. And that is the way to growth. They're telling us AI is coming and we must depend because AI is going to bring us, new jobs. And people sit there and they listen and believe every word that their politicians tell them. Right? So I'm asking the question, are we losing something important as faith declines? Do you think strong religious values are necessary for a stable society? Do we really think so? Or do we think we can continue living like this, hoping that there's going to be a messiah, a political messiah, like the likes of Obama and also the likes of Miss Mia Mottley? In fact, I don't want to cast, based on my short time in this podcast system, I realize that a lot of the Barbadians are quite very, very much irreligious. They just don't want to hear anything about religion. right? And I'm wondering if Miss Mia Motley is filling that vacuum. That is why you have a person like Miss Mia Motley. And that is going to happen in all societies, whether it's in Jamaica or it's in Trinidad. Very soon, our politicians are going to be the ones that we worship. Okay? Because we don't have any other faith. Right? So you have to put your faith in a politician. You've got to put your faith in a system that is not working. Right? So we're asking the question, do you think strong religious values are necessary for a stable society? What do we think? Right? The founding fathers of the United States, by the way, were not religious in the true sense of the word. But, had they not written a very important constitution, slavery would not have ended. Do you know that W. E. Du Bois in the Black Reconstruction said that religion was the only tool that they could use to say that slavery, to justify that slavery was not, by nature? Was the Bible. That was the only thing that they could have used. Nothing else. The science was against them because the whole matter of the theory of evolution and suggesting that the black person at the bottom of the barrel, right? That men are not all equal. Nature does not create us that way. Okay? So what are we going to use now when they destroy, when our political leaders destroy the whole fabric of faith in the region? What are we going to use to tell them that lying is wrong, right? Deceits are wrong. This economic system that we have is flawed. What are we going to use? Because when they tell you that nothing is wrong with it, when they kill you, without any excuse, any justification, what are you going to use against what they're doing? You tell me. I don't know. Now, if you're young, what is your relationship with religion today? And if we have any young people on, if we have any young people on the live, I really want you to tell me, if you are young, what is your relationship or lack of relationship with religion today? And why do you think religion is not necessary? Why do you think it's just a figment of the imagination, as some people declare it? Something not to take seriously. Somebody told me on a recent video, oh, that simple thing you call religion, it's not to be taken seriously. And I said, oh, something that defines every human being, whether you like it or not, whether your car is your God, or it's Jay-Z, or it is whomever. Okay? Religion defines you, whether you like it or not. Okay? And many of you, when things get haywire, even atheists call out for a higher being. When they're in a crisis, 9/11. I remember I was in the United States during 9/11. And after 9/11 happened, the churches were packed to capacity after 9/11. Why? People were afraid. People were afraid and they did not know what to expect. But when things seem to be okay, and to some extent rosy, and we have not seen the half of it yet, then we tend to just look and think that, oh, this is the norm, right? And we don't have to, request any help from any higher being because everything is going out well. Everything is fine. But what happens when you are alone by yourself? If you're in a jail, what are you going to? Who are you going to depend on the it's sad. It is sad, and it is something that we've got to think about as we are now seeing the UFOs and AI is taking over. We must understand that even the AI is something dangerous that we don't even understand. Okay, it's something dangerous. It's a dangerous human invention that we have not fully explored here in the Caribbean region. Some Americans have done it, but we're not willing to do that because anything the US tells us to do, we think is a sign of modernity. It is something that we have to follow. It's something that makes us look civilized when it's creating an uncivilized culture. Okay, now, if you're older What do you think changed from your generation to now? I want to hear from some of us who are older. If you're older, what do you think has changed from then when you were a younger citizen to now? Oh, I'm not seeing the comments. I'm sorry. Let me read the comments. Yeah, I've been ignoring the comments. I'm just seeing them coming. Sorry if you left and I have not. I'm so sorry. Okay, good. Thank you so much for joining. I did not see all these comments. I'm sorry. Well, this is one thing I have an issue with. When we had her in schools, Curtis Dion Lee made barbecues Japan and dropped two nukes on them. Yeah, but when we look at who are doing those, the leaders or the people, the students, the citizens of the country, the leaders certainly were waging war, but how were we shaped in terms of those who were not warmongers? Were we supporting the wars? I find now that even American citizens are supporting wars. Even some of because we have become accustomed to wars right now. And it's almost that we don't know that it's like nothing's wrong with killing. And that is right now, when we think about crime and violence doesn't mean anything to us anymore in the Caribbean. We cry when our loved one dies, of course, right? But if we hear that another person is shot, well, it's a normal thing, right? It's a normal thing. Now, I suppose at the same time, the church has to come with a new message based on their religious beliefs to meet the needs of a new generation. That's not what the church is there to do. The church is there to preach whatever is right. Values last forever. And that's the whole thing. That is why our politics is not really worth anything, because they change the message to suit the hearer, even when what they're doing is wrong. Right? And the values should last throughout. And the values of the church should be eternal truths. Okay? So you don't go to church because you want to hear what you want to hear. And that is the world we live in now. People tell us what we want to hear. People go on podcasts because they want to hear what they want to hear and not what they need to hear. Because the human sensibilities like to know that they can get a free ride, and that they can just think something simple and move on, because take the vaccine and move on. You just move on. Is that so? And then when they realize that that is not so, you just don't take a vaccine and move on. It doesn't work like that, right? It comes with severe consequences. And he's saying it is because they don't consider voodoo a religion, but it is. Absolutely. And the Haitians know. Even the Haitians know that it's a religion. So I'm not sure why they don't think voodoo is a religion, right? And much of our politicians, unfortunately, practice it. Chris is saying, I'm not really sure religious values make for a better society, although I do think faith is necessary. What's the difference, right? What is the difference between faith and the church or religion? None. Right, and this is what we have done. We have begun now as a society to make up definitions for different things, and then what happens? We are confused. We confuse ourselves, right? Because again, it sounds intellectual, it sounds scholastic, but it's false. And this is what we're doing in our education system too. And the church also should be blamed, as you're saying. The church wants to present this message so that people can be cool and the prosperity gospel, right? We should be all rich and whatever, right? Rather than the truth that God or whatever religion you ascribe to has suggested. And a lot of time, truth is inconvenient. We don't want to hear that. Anything that will help to titivate our egos, to massage our egos, that's what we want to hear. And our politicians, that's what they do. And that's why they're destroying our societies. Because they want to hear what we tell them. And oftentimes we praise them. Oh, they're great, right? They've done this, they've done that. And they praise themselves, they're demigods, and then we suffer. Rather than telling them the truth, that this is what you are doing, we don't want to do that, do we? Okay? But the two cannot cohere. Either they hear the truth, or we end up paying the consequences. And we are, aren't we? We're suffering the consequences of our politicians who have no sort of scruples anymore. They just do whatever they want to do. But who would blame them if our society is totally ignorant? Now, Steve Knight is saying, I wouldn't follow the stars or politicians because their religion is not our religion. Correct. Right? But that is what people are following. That is what people are following. And the politicians also and the economic oligarchs who control these musicians and the celebrities, that's what people are following. All the music that we sing in secular society controlled by the same spirit. And we are moving in that direction. We think that it's okay. The Caribbean is in a very dark stage, and you're not going to see it until it happens, until everything is tumbling down upon us. Now, well, I suppose religion does help to lay down necessary boundaries. It does. It does. Just like any parents are necessary. Because you have a few abusive parents, don't mean that you don't need guidance from parents. Right? And now we're hearing that, you can have two women as parents, you can have two men as parents, and that does not work. Because we know that both parents, a man and a woman, play different roles. Right? But we are hearing these things, they sound very modern, and we think that that is the way we should go. And what's happening? The entire family structure is imploding, exploding, if you will. Stephen Knight is saying that here in America, they have a faith-based initiative. It has failed. Yeah, and this faith-based thing is dangerous too, right? Because again, politics control religion. That is what you should not have. They should be separate. So you're right that there should not be any faith-based initiative, because when the government gives you some money, the government will want to do what they want you to do. And the same thing is happening in the Caribbean to our educational system too. Before, the church had more autonomy over the schools because they were the ones who founded them, right? But as time went by and they could no longer support, financially these institutions, then you had the politics that went in, and what happened afterwards, they controlled the curriculum, they controlled everything, they told you what to do, what not to do, right? Because they're paying for it. And this is what we're finding now in our schools and in politics, in the church, that it is corrupted because of politics, or what we call politricks. Chris is saying, in the days when our parents had strong religious values, we don't know what difficulties they were suffering because the morality of the society pushed them to stay quiet. What is the morality of what society? Now, when we talk about the church and society, we are the church and we are the society. Do you know that? Okay, so whatever the pulse of society is, we are the ones contributing to that society. If Jamaica is not doing well, which it is not doing well, it's because Jamaicans don't want it to do well, because they represent what is happening there. But we tend to sometimes say, the church, and you're a part of the church, so you are part of the system. Okay, let's talk about that. And let's also bear responsibility for what the ills of the society. We can't separate ourselves from the failures of our societies. And that's what we like to do. It's him. He's a problem. Okay? Not me. So when people select Mia Motley, they're the problem, not them. Okay? But what if we should have a deep reflection about our responsibility as individuals, because we make up the general society? We might not participate in everything, but we do have responsibility, and we have to understand that. Michael Smith, welcome to the live. Faith, Black people got to return to the power of Abraham, Isaac, and Israelites, the God of our ancestors, not the son of Mary. Well, the fact of the matter, the son of Mary was not the son of Mary, the son of God. He just came through human flesh, and he is the creator of Abraham, Isaac, and the Israelis. What about that, right? We have to get the root, and the root of it is the Son of God created Abraham, all right, if you believe in that, Abraham, Isaac, and the Israelites. So we can have a discussion on that. Now, we have Chris is saying, during slavery, they used religion to justify slavery before science came along. The U.S. slave masters created the slave Bible, editing it down, removing books to make it justify slavery. Now, let me say something. Two things that you need to learn here. Religion never, the Bible never justified slavery. Religion was used to justify slavery. Just like we can say science was never used to justify what they're doing, during the pandemic. It was the politicians who put their flavor on science, right? And said that this was a science. But when you listen to persons like, John Campbell and real scientists, they will say that they never agreed with a lot of what the politicians were doing. But the politicians used their flavor and their cunning, and they merged science with politics. And this is where now, during slavery, the Catholic Church was the church that united, because the Catholic Church believes in church and state fusion, right? So they were the ones who actually believed in slavery, and they were the ones who controlled the politicians, right, to get the profits that came from slavery. So we have to get the history right. Now, science in terms of when the whole justification for religiosity, because the more the people study the Bible, they realize that the Bible never justified slavery. It weakened the argument for slavery. That is when they turn to science. So they say, well, the people are studying the Bible now. We can't tell them because they're reading for themselves. They know that it is not true. And let me say something to you. When you read slavery also throughout the Caribbean, throughout North America, most of the slaves who were literate, when they started to learn and read the Bible themselves, they were the ones who became the abolitionists. And they said, look here, guys, the ignorant ones, the Bible never said what they're telling you. Right? Samuel Sharp of Jamaica from Montego Bay, he launched a big rebellion because he was literate in the Bible. And he realized, you would leave. Some of you are going to leave because you don't want to learn. Okay? And that's why we just repeat what we hear others of our colleagues are saying without reading for ourselves. This is also another problem in the Caribbean. We repeat what we hear, and we do not try to read for ourselves and to understand. Right? So the U.S. slave masters created the slave Bible, editing it down. That is not true. It was not. Slavery wasn't created by the U.S. in the first place. Right? It was a papal system. The United States adopted it rather. Right? But it was not coming from the U.S. The U.S. borrowed it, which was wrong. So we have to begin to read our histories for ourselves. Read the Bible or the Quran or the whatever for yourselves. Don't let people tell you what to believe, right? They just sum up some things and you believe and you run with it, right? But you have to read for yourselves and make sure you get a thorough understanding. Parse it, right? And not just read one section and say this is what it believes. You have to read the entire thing and compare and contrast. Now, I agree that strong religious values make for, that's Marie saying, for a more stable society. It's just that the current crop of religious people are opportunists and very carnal. That is true. And the people of Tobago who are mostly SDAs. Yes, and that is true. That there are lots of, when you think about the Jews, and they were called by God to proclaim a gospel to the world, and they failed miserably. But did that make it wrong? No. So that's what we're here to say, that even though there are lots of flaws, we don't hold to human standards. We have to hold to a standard of a higher being. Because humans are not our examples, no matter how good they look. How many times have we heard even people who are non-religious, who look good and they seem to have been on the right track? I've had persons who tell me that Bill Clinton was their role model. And look at some of the things that Bill Clinton has done. One of the worst persons you can have as role model. But the fact is that people look at people based on the image that is painted in their eyes. First of all, we can't read the heart, right? So we can't read human hearts. So we tend to look at people, and let's not look at people. Let's look at the Bible or the Quran or whatever you believe in, and look at the author of that particular book that you claim that you might ascribe yourselves to. Because if you look at human beings, you are not going to believe anything, right? Because they're going to fail you. Align themselves with a political party whose members perform is it pujas to Kali Ma? Right. We have to be, yeah, and this is what we have. That's why we're having this conversation, that there are lots of things happening in the church, which and you know, and in religious faith, which should not be happening. Right. And we have to cry out and say these things are wrong, just in the same way we do in science, in the school system. You know, we are here to say what is wrong. But again, we can't throw out the baby, because you let us say we're not going back to school, we're not going to be illiterate. Many of our society people are going to be illiterate, and lots of things. So we can cry out aloud what is happening in institutions, but let's not now throw the baby out with the bathwater. We want to refine it. We want to say, expose what is wrong, right? Just like government. Look at politics. You know, based on what we're seeing now, they're not even working for us. But should we get rid of government? No, because without government, you're going to have what? Chaos, anarchy. We don't want to have that. So we need institutions, but we can say, and I agree with you, that our institutions, including our church, have failed a lot of people. But the principles, just like we can lose faith in the United States as it is now, but we should not lose hope in the principles of the Constitution. It's the Constitution that we should be saying, are you following the Constitution? That you should not just go and meddle yourselves in foreign wars and all of that stuff. That is that all humans are created equally, and that was a clause that was used to justify the end of slavery. All right? By the way, when we look at slavery, you know, while we saw the William Wilberforce and all these people, you know, they ended slavery and whatever in the Caribbean, but we still were not equal. And we didn't achieve most of what we should have accomplished, because they still did not believe that we were equal. Right? The only way that you could have a lasting and continue to have the struggles in the States is because the Constitution said that we were created equal by our Creator. Not by politicians, not by the environment, by our Creator. And we have to understand that, because if those things go, you know, the principles of the Constitution, the clauses, it means therefore that slavery can be justified again. Because science is going to justify it again. Right? The scientists don't believe that black people are equal to them. Right? They don't. The church people might not believe that, but the book that they read, called the Bible, does not believe it and does not endorse it. So people can say, your Bible doesn't endorse it. Your book that you're reading doesn't endorse it. But when the Constitution goes, as a secular country, the United States is a secular country and should be a secular country, a secular democracy. When that goes, the Constitution goes, they can justify slavery anew without anything to suggest that we're all equal. Modern SDAs are different, and modern day SDAs are different. They might be, but again, we have to understand that the Bible is eternal, and it's whatever from yesteryear to whatever, eternal. Now, church has become a personal bank for many of these preachers. Yes, we have seen where the church, because what happened? What is happening is because of us too, you know. The church is the way it is because of people. People don't want to hear about their sin. Many people are shacking up, right? They don't want to hear that they should not be committing adultery. Many people are, you know what, they're stealers, they're whatever, right? We are plagued with sin. When you go to church, you don't want to hear that, because you know you're shacking up with whomever, right? So it would be better if the pastor talks about, you know, prosperity and a God of love, but at the same time, he's using religion, he's watering down the Bible and the message to suit your needs and what you don't want to hear. Why do you think many people don't come on this podcast? Because they don't want to hear the truth. They don't want to hear hard questions. They don't want to have any part of these hard discussions. It's better to just go and listen to about Miss Mia Motley and she's corrupt and the political drama, and that is what fills them up. But it's not helping them, and it is neither helping the society, because they're not coming away with any root cause of or causes of why we are in the problem that we are in right now. But every night they congregate to hear the same drama, and political theater. And they react to it and they move on. But what is the medicine? How is it that we are going to be cured? And can we just blame politicians forever and not going back to what we need to fix? And perhaps the whole system needs to change, needs to be destroyed, whatever it is. But certainly it's not working now. And maybe we need the same thing for the church. We need to stop preaching this, what you call it, gospel, this prosperity gospel, and let's start talking about, righteousness and not sinning. But because we are sinful people and we don't like to hear our things exposed, right? I know they're going up to say Andrew did that or Andrew did this, but the Bible is saying that you should not do it. And you're saying, I want to do it. So the preacher tells you what you want to hear. Just like the politicians give you what you want to do, what you want to hear. They tell you what you want to hear, even though that's not what they should do. But you create them because you want them to tell you what you want to hear. And so we are the ones responsible for what we have created. We've created monsters. Marie said, when you align yourself with people who venerate destructive deities, there will be bloodshed. They ought to have known this. And the same thing for the science too, Marie. And I'm sure you work for the hospital or the clinic or the medical system, and they want blood too. But should you just say that, oh, I'm not going to remain in the medical profession because lots of my colleagues are criminals, which they are? Okay? No. We can't now behave as if we are righteous, right? And they are sinners. We have to expose what is wrong, hoping that they will change, but we are not gods, so we can't change them. But we can just present what we can to them in the political realm, in the spiritual realm, in the medical realm. We tell them what is wrong. We highlight that which is wrong, and we leave them. But in our societies now, we tend to think, I often hear people, even before they go into politics, they will tell you how the politicians are wicked and they won't do this. And they themselves enter politics tomorrow and they do the same thing or worse, because human beings are of that sort of nature. It's easier said than done. Easier said. When we are not a part of it, when you go into a system that is corrupt and you see hundreds of thousands of dollars before you, what prevents you from not stealing? You think many of us aren't going to steal it? Only something deeper will prevent us from not doing it. And many don't have that deeper faith to say, thou shalt not steal. They can't look at millions of dollars knowing that it can be in their pockets and not steal it. And that is why our politicians who went into change end up being the same person or persons that they were critiquing and criticizing. Are we the same thing with our churchgoers? Yeah, we have to now say, are we doing the same thing? Are we guilty of the same things? We've got to also, begin to assess our own selves. The SDAs of my generation would have considered this and discussed it. Yeah, well, maybe you need to tell them, Marie, that because I have the same criticism, Marie. To be frank with you, I'm SDA and I have the same thing. Sometimes you don't want to even see them. because the hypocrisy, the whatever. But at the end of the day, when I go to church, I say I'm not there to meet them, right? You greet them because they're your brothers and sisters, but you're not there to serve them, right? You have the being that you go there to meet, and you'll never in this life go to a church that is healthy and that is sinless. People are shacking up too. People are stealing, right? I was amazed to see, for example, Marie, that there were people who I knew who are upstanding people, right? Graduated from very good universities in the United States. And people were saying, wow, that person is stealing. He's the treasurer of the church and he's stealing. By the way, do you know that Judas, who was with Christ, one of Christ's disciples, he was one of Christ's disciples and he was stealing from the treasury, right? Do you know that? Stealing. Until eventually, you know what he did. So one of the things is, but who actually dealt with him? God himself, not us, because we're not God. So we allowed people to ruin themselves. We pray for them, and hopefully they will change. And we expose them if we can say, hey, call them apart. Hey, what about your being too X, Y, or Z? It's not healthy. And you pray for them. All right? Because people sometimes they're just hopeless. But sometimes you have to inspire some sort of hope in them. Even though it's hard to do. Don't get me wrong, because I'm like yourself, Marie, I cut to the chase and I don't like to see the hypocrisy. Chris is saying, I'm not saying that the truth should change or that you should say what people want to hear, but you have to take your external values and express it to a new come on. The same values that we're talking about, a new generation, the generation that we have today is worse, right? The generation of today is worse. No values. And when you talk to them about traditional values, they don't want to hear it. And it's still the traditional values that keep the society wholesome. Right? But what they want to do, as that we're saying, goes right back. They want to do what they want to do. And they don't want the consequences to follow. And that's what the problem with our generation. They just want to be free. And we call it libertarianism. That is what people mix up liberty, freedom of choice, with doing whatsoever you want to do, with no consequences necessary. And this is, do you know, by the way, that we don't live in a new generation? That the same generation that we live in is, we've had generations like this before. We've had generations like this before. Sodom and Gomorrah, right? The flood, the deluge that came upon the earth. All of these people were equivalent. Nothing new under the sun. But we always think when human beings, because we go through cycles, and as sometimes we pass through cycles of lack of prosperity, and when we do pass through cycles of prosperity, then we begin to move away from a higher being, and we think that we are gods. Right? We don't have to listen to any other thing. And watch people. You have some Caribbean people, and they go to the States, and they're holier than thou. They're religious, and they, how great thou art, and they sing, and they always. And when they go to the United States and they get a good job and everything is going well as they think, for now, you forget about religion, right? You mean shopping, and you shop until you're tired, because that is your new religion, right? But when you were in the Caribbean and you couldn't eat, you didn't have any teeth in your mouth, as this Barbadian would say, right? Now that you have some teeth in your mouth, you are better than everybody, right? And you don't remember God, right? You don't remember anything about God because something has replaced that void, but it hasn't really, but you think it has. Okay. Stephen is saying, now here in Atlanta, I have noticed a change after 9/11, and especially during the pandemic. Yeah, there's a change. And there's a change. And you really wonder, if you are not believing in God, why did you come to church after 9/11? Why did people just fill up the church after 9/11? Why? You don't believe in God, just leave church out of it. Why is it that when these things happen, a big earthquake happens and everybody's going to church? Right? The buildings are burning down, the pandemic, everybody wants to be religious. Right? Why? Because human beings are hypocritical by nature. And whether you're religious or irreligious, you only respond to God when things are not going well. Right? Or when I say God, I mean any higher being, Krishna or whoever you think you serve. You only want to know about these beings when things are not going right. Okay? Apart from that, who cares? Who cares? And then when your child is involved in different dark things, you really wonder, is this really real? Is this my child? And you blame God for that, How could you, God? How could you do that? When I grew up my child in the best way. But did you involve God in the process? So why blame him? Love to challenge. Yeah, we'll challenge. That's what we're here to do, to challenge. The Bible hella justified slavery, you were saying. Well, how did the Bible justify slavery? Then there are whole sections in the Bible on how to care for your slaves. Yeah, because you're a slave now. Do you know that? Back then in the Bible, you have economic slavery. So what happened is that some of the people they owed money to their slave masters. Okay, and we are doing the same thing too now. That's why the Bible was saying that we should be a lender and not a borrower, because a lender, as the Bible says, is slave to a borrower. Rather, a borrower is slave to the lender. So right now, even Jamaica, countries like these who are part of the IMF and the World Bank, they are slaves. They are slaves, and they have to do so. Christ was saying, not because you come now and say that you're Christians, that you should not pay back the person that you borrowed from. So you can't say you became Christian and you borrowed some money from the bank, right? And you're indebted, and tell God that just wipe it out. He's not going to do it, because you have to be responsible. And this is what we talk about economic slavery. It was not justifying chattel slavery. And this is what people don't read. They don't compare. All they want to say, oh, yeah, the Bible justified slavery. The Bible did not justify slavery, but it taught them how to deal with a system in which they had to function that he did not create. So if you put yourself in debt, in high debt, irresponsibly, God is not going to come miraculously come and take you out of it because you did it. Right? Just like if you go and you shack up with somebody, you got them pregnant, he's going to tell you how to deal with it, but you cannot just get up and leave the baby alone and the mother. So God gives us instructions when we mess up, how we need to take care of the system that we find ourselves in. Okay? Because we have to be responsible. And that is what we have to understand. Exodus 21 verse 2 states that the Hebrew slave is to serve for only 6 years and must be set free in the step. Absolutely. And what is wrong with that? If, as I'm suggesting to you, if you find that somebody did not use their resources well, which some of them didn't, and they became eventually economic slaves to their brothers. So if I owe you $10,000, right, it would be in that a form of slavery. Because as the Bible says, a borrower is slave to the lender. So what God is saying, that if he's not able to pay it after 7 years, in some cases, for the Israelites, they should just forgive them. So God had a better plan. Let us say you're the IMF now. If we were the IMF and we're following biblical standards, after the 7th year, they would forgive our debt. Do you know that? That's what the Bible is saying. After the 7th year, because we're slaves to them, we have to be paying them all of this money, and it never ends. All right? But the Bible is saying after 7. So if we were in biblical times or following biblical standards, then after the Jamaica being with the IMF for 7 years, boom, it is forgiven. But you have to pay until the 7th year. So this is exactly what the Bible is saying. The Bible is not endorsing it, but it's saying that this is where you find yourselves, you put yourselves, and we are the ones who put ourselves into the situation that we find ourselves in. Right? The psalmist is saying, when freeing a Hebrew servant, masters were instructed in Deuteronomy 15, verse 13 to 14, to provide them with generous provisions from the flock, threshing floor, and winepress. Isn't that wonderful, the psalmist show, if you understand what the Bible is about? Yeah. If you are the ones who've placed yourselves with, and your parents, sometimes not only you, but your parents might have put you into that situation, God is saying to the masters, be nice to them until they finish paying what they owe to you. You set them free. And if they don't finish paying what they owe to you on the 7th year, forgive them and let them move on. What if we were doing that in our life? Do you know that Michael, what's his name again? Michael, the guy that is an economist, Michael Hudson, wrote an entire book on the matter of debt forgiveness following Deuteronomy and Leviticus. He says if we were to follow, and he is not religious. Michael Hudson is an American, he's not religious. He doesn't go to any church. But having an intelligent man, he read the whole book of the Bible, particularly that which has to do with debt forgiveness, and he wrote an entire book laying out to our politicians and economists that this, if we were to follow these guidelines, our nations would not have been indebted. Right? Because indebtedness is a form of slavery. We are the only ones who just think that slavery is just, is just shackle and putting over some shackles over your hand and your feet, right? And this is the level of poor quality education that we are getting in the Caribbean and in the world at large, where we don't even understand biblical history because we think we know. We read out of context. And here you have this intellectual, right? Secular intellectual, Michael Hudson. Go and read it. You can Google the book. And talk about debt forgiveness, Michael Hudson, and that's exactly what he based his, solutions on. Do you know the Bible has solutions for everything, including slavery? Because if the truth be told, a lot of us become slaves because we did it. We asked slavery to come on us, to come up on us. We are the ones who caused it, in so many cases. Yeah. Michael Simon, the son of Mary, is not the creator of all things alone by himself, my bro. His name is not written in the fourth commandment. He did not say, have no other gods before me. He is the same exactly who said that. So you need to go and read the Bible. The Bible says in John 1, verse 1, that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And it says afterwards that there was nothing made without him, right? So that the Word was Christ, and he was with God, and he made everything. And there's nothing that he did not make that was made. So you have to read the Bible throughout, my son. Chris is saying, no, the slave Bible was a particular Bible that American slave masters edited and gave to the slaves to push. Oh, I see what you're saying. So that they had a separate Bible, you're saying, that was not the original Bible. Then that is, I see what you're saying now. Message of slaves, you can put it into, yeah. No, now I understand what you're saying, Chris. Is it Chris? Yeah, Chris. I understand you. Then we have the Simon Show is saying Exodus 21, verse 20-21 dictates that if a master beats a male or female slave and the slave dies, the master must be punished. If the slave survives for a day or two, the owner is not punished because that's what is whole. So what is wrong with that? God says that if they beat if the slave master, right? If that dictates that if a slave master beats a male or female slave and the slave dies, the master must be punished. Now, how many of us died during slavery and were not punished? The slave masters, were they punished? No. If the slave survives a day or two, the owner is not punished because, but he's the slave is considered the owner's property. Same thing for us right now. Who you think controls Barbados or Trinidad? Which the country that you live in? That's what we have been discussing on this program, Simon Show. If you come on the program and you follow our understanding of what is going on in the economic realm, we're saying once the oligarchs, the United States, when you talk about the Monroe Doctrine, right, and all these things, who do you think controls the very country that you live in? You think it's Kamala Person-Bissessar or Trinidadians? No. Right? It's not they who control the whole system. And that is why we do what they tell us to do, because they are the ones who say that they are the owners. We are their property, in other words. And that is why President, what's his name? Trump went to Venezuela and took out a sitting president that did not trouble him, because he thinks that Venezuela is the property of the United States. And he went there and took their oil and did whatever he wants to do with it. All right. So we are living in slavery too. We are slaves right now in our own economies. And that's what I'm saying to you. We are at a point now that we need to call out to a superior being, because these people are not helping us. And they're not coming up with any solutions that are going to put us out of our predicament. The Bible supports slavery. Well, if you don't want to learn, I can't really teach. Now we have here Stephen Knight is saying, don't forget, everyone has their own right interpretation of this book. That's why I stay away from arguments when it comes to a book that has been somewhat distorted. Well, we can say everybody can have their own interpretation of history, right? Everybody can have their own interpretation of anything, and that's what we call relativity, right? And we don't believe in anything absolute anymore. So I can say that slavery is justifiable. And I can present my views to you why it is, right? And this is what we have to understand. And people do that every day. Science, look at what they did during the pandemic again. They presented their stuff and they said that this, according to their science, was justifiable. But there is a truth, and there is an absolute truth, and we've got to know. So we have to move away from the Bible is not its own interpreter, and we can't get truth from the Bible because everybody's interpreting it. Because if we do that, then everybody can interpret whatever data they have according to their opinions, according to their experience. But we can't just say that, because we can look at the data for ourselves and try to be honest and say that it is not so, having read through all of what it was, displaying, it was showing. So we have to move away from relativity and saying that things are all according to somebody's truth is according to your interpretation. Because what if I do believe in slavery? What if slavery is my truth? Then I can enslave you, can't I? As far as the Constitution, that piece of paper has been shredded many times over this administration and the many administrations before, absolutely. But it still has a little piece of it still. And when everything goes, then that's when we're in trouble. So that's what we should be fighting for, rather than fighting for a president and bigging up a president. We should not be so much worried about presidents if they just follow that document, right? We shouldn't be worried about a pastor or church if they just follow what the Bible instructs them to do. But what we have done now, we have said, okay, well, Barack Obama is a modern president, so let him do what modern people do, what modern presidents do. Right? Miss Mia Motley is a modern president. She believes in climate change, so let her do, because we're living in climate change, and that's the new agenda. Different world, different experience, but we have to expose them nonetheless. But the church is always telling people how sinful they are also, and has no other message for people also. So what is the point of a doctor? The doctor tells you that you're ill. Right? Most of the time you go there and you go to a doctor because we live with a body that gets ill. No, not every time the church is going to tell that you're sinful. It tells you other things too, guides you in terms of encouraging you to walk the straight and the narrow. But when you go to a church, just like you go to going to a hospital, and most of the time when you go to a hospital, you see what? People who are ill, right? And they go there for medication. So the church is that center where you get your spiritual medication according to what the Bible says. In the hospital, you get your medication according to what good science dictates. And unfortunately, we can say that right now we're in a world where sometimes they give you corrupt science, in the same way that they give you corrupt interpretation of the Bible to take care of your spiritual needs. Okay, but it doesn't mean, therefore, that there's no space for a hospital. There's still space and there's still need for hospitals. But is that the way in which it's given now, as you're suggesting? Corruption has taken over our world. So everything from religion to science to education to economics, everything is run by corrupt men and women. That's the problem we face. It doesn't mean, therefore, that we're going to throw out the baby with the bathwater. That's what we're saying here. But we can't say that governments are not necessary. We can't say that doctors are not necessary, hospitals are not necessary, and we can't say that churches equally are not necessary, because they play a vital role in human lives. We are triune beings. We have the physical, the mental, and the spiritual, whether we like it or not. We don't like to hear about, because again, we want to hear what we want to hear. And we want it, and when the mental illness comes upon us and we have dark spirits hanging around us, you run to the church. Right? Sometimes when it's too far. Okay? Just the same way with physical ailment. Many of us don't like to go to the doctor, and when the disease comes and it is stage 4 cancer, we cry. Right? We cry. What if you had just got yourself checked? Right? But it's just the way we are. Now, Stephen is saying, not personally. Here in Georgia, I do not attend church. No, it's not personal, and it's okay. And nothing is wrong in saying you are atheistic or you're. I'm just saying we're asking some questions here, and we're saying, are these the fact that we are now less spiritual? Is it affecting our societies? Are we now being run as some hoodlums and like a desert, a wild zone, chaotic? Nobody know what is right or wrong. Who is a woman from a man? All of the things that that were set in stone and people never argued with for years, for centuries. People never argued the difference between a man and a woman. It was just self-evident truth. But now the science is telling us that we're living in modern age and there is no difference. And a man can have children and all the nonsense. Okay? Not personally here in Georgia, I do not attend church anymore. I used to. The bunch of nonsense now. When I'm home, I'll attend the service or two. Yes, because sometimes it's needed. Sometimes it's needed, and I understand. And let us understand that sometimes as I understand what Marie says, sometimes we don't want to, having gone to work and you have to deal with hypocrites at the workplace, and then you go back to church and it's the same thing. So it can be a double-edged sword. I understand that. Sometimes I'm feel like that too. Why am I going around these hypocrites, and they claim that they are righteous than anything else? But as I said, what really gives me hope is that I'm not there to meet with them. I'm there to meet with God. And sometimes if you have selective attention and you don't even watch them, right? You just watch read the word and remain in the word. That is what helps you. And we need that physical attention too, the physical touch of people and to be able to say, pray for me. It helps us, when you're going through something really, really hard and you can look at a brother or sister and say, pray for me. It helps to lighten that sort of load that you're carrying. And what we're saying is that in the Caribbean, they're reporting that our young people are filled with cares and they're depressed. And there's nobody to help them. Because particularly for Black people, we think that mental health we should not share it with others because people think that we're stupid. In Jamaica, they'll say, oh, I'm mad. Well, he's mad, he's crazy because he's just mentally challenged, right? It's the same thing like if you're physically challenged or if you're spiritually challenged. These are just illnesses we have. And why not talk about them? Why not say that something is seriously wrong? And not because I'm going to church, and now people, if they go to church, people mock them. Oh, the Bible supports slavery. But the Bible never supported slavery. That's a lie. And is it amazing that we are now literate in terms of calling words, right? And have access to the Bible, and we don't read them. And, you had slaves who never had access to the Bible, and yet still they were able to listen to the ones who were literate, who were educating them and telling them that they were told lies. And they educated themselves. Do you know why the United States actually imposed Jim Crow laws in America? Because the Blacks had moved away from slavery and they had become so literate in a short time because they were hungry for literacy, right? And they were growing. They were growing. And what happened? Jim Crow, and they broke their spirits. And then came integration. And what happened? We think we have reached the stars. We're integrated into the lives of white people. We stopped going to church. We stopped reading our Bibles. And now the Black community is filled with a lot of problems. Can't be turned back. You can't turn back that clock. It is what it is. It is what it is. And people are reading in Great Britain too. The same thing is happening in Great Britain. And they're suggesting that literacy rates, have declined astronomically because people no longer used to read their Bibles. What do you think educated the people like the Shakespeare? The Bible. Many of our scientists, the Bible. The Bible was the main literary book. And some of them did not really believe the Bible, but they recognized the wisdom therein. Because there's a difference, You might not read it because you subscribe to it, but you cannot deny the wisdom that comes from it. Chris is saying, well, that's up to the church to teach people the history behind the Bible. Why should the church teach you that? When you can go on, this again, we want everything is up to the church. Oh, is the school should teach your children how to read? No, you should learn how to read before you go to school, right? But we leave these things up to the school and to the church and to the government, and the government must do this and the government must do that, right? And we have no responsibility that lies upon us. So you can study about that too, and then you can go now to church, engage other minds, and say, let's have a discussion based on what I have read, based on my research, and then we can have a conversation. But as a church must do this and the church must do that. The church must turn into a Christian, right? Is that true? Now, I read the Bible, Michael Smith is saying, but you need to study and know Torah. Is it Tanakh? You know that the Son of Mary did not create all things alone by himself. Why believe otherwise? Well, that's what the Bible says. The Bible says that without him, there was nothing made that was made. And he was the Word. Everybody knows that the Word referred to Christ, right? Because he is himself, So, yeah, we differ on that, Michael. But we could have a discussion on that, because it's worth the while to have, that where that your gods can't give you all a clear book that doesn't need interpretation. All books need interpretation, by the way. History needs to be interpreted. Science needs to be interpreted. And that is why we were in the pandemic situation. Everything that we read that requires critical thought and critical thinking need to be interpreted. But what we need to do is to learn how, that's what critical thinking comes about, how to interpret. The data, you get data and you have to interpret it. And so often they say, oh, it's science and it's exact. But no science is exact because people interpret it. Right? No medication is exact because the doctor looks at your body and what the body is doing and interpret what medicine to give to you. And sometimes he gives you the wrong medicine. Sometimes he or she gives you the wrong medicine because according to his wrong interpretation. Got that, Sammy? So that's what we're saying. If you have critical thinking, nothing comes, you just look at it and it's clear as, ABC. And if God were to do that, what citizens would he make in terms of thinking? God wants you to think, Come, let us reason. That's what the Bible says. Come, let us reason. So he wants you to think. So he's not going to give you on a platter, on a silver platter, and say, oh, it's clear. Some things are, but some things aren't. Just like you're reading a book, and you have different interpretations. You have the literal meaning. You have where you have to draw inference, right? And you have the critical stage of thinking, right? That is any literature, and the Bible is a book of literature. Then we have Simon Show is saying, why study a book that was, okay, I read it 2,000 years ago. A lot of what we have in our world today is very old, right? But it doesn't mean that they're not relevant. Hope is offered. I'm not sure what you mean by hope is offered. How come we don't have updated Bible for our times? Where did your God go? He don't have any spokesman down here? Very good question. God is omnipotent. He's also omniscient. Omniscient means that he knows everything from the beginning to the end, right? So if he knew way before when, and he lived through our society that we live in, what can we tell him that would not have happened? So that's why he gives us prophecies and all of that. So if you study the prophecies of the Revelation and other prophecies in the Bible, you will see that he told us exactly what is happening in our time, and it's happening so. But have you studied those prophecies, Simon Show? So he has told us from the beginning, from years ago, what would have happened because he is omniscient. Look up the meaning of that word, omniscient. So you think corruption just started recently? I don't think that's the point I'm making, right? Why do we twist people's arguments? What I'm suggesting here is that corruption has always existed, but people they were conditioned that there are absolutes, but right now we're saying everything is relative and there's no truth anymore. It's truth according to you. So when we're conditioned like that, our politicians can do anything and say, well, that is your truth. But what if I kill you? What if I don't like Jews and I kill all of them? Then that's my truth. And how can society grow? How can we, how can we even exist? We cannot with that sort of thinking. Okay. Steve Knight is saying for some people, religion has been beaten into them like the correct master beat that Christianity into their slaves. That's why some people don't question, and that is true. That is true. Even the way our parents did some of us going to school, right, and doing some of the things that they're like, they just drag us, and they just, even the discipline that they gave to us, it was good enough. The discipline sometimes was good. It's just how they did it. Right? So if they want you to read a book and to be readers, you must read, and you must do everything they want. Every time you sit down to do something, they want you to read. Take up your book, take up your book, take up your book. Right? But that's not, sometimes we needed to relax too, right? But so it's not that reading was wrong, right? It's just the way how they went about. It's not we should do our chores, but it's that the way how they told us to do our chores made us sometimes growing up and not even liking to do chores because we had to do this every morning. Right? And the way how they did it, it was just a lot of times not the best. The way how they beat us, sometimes not that they could spank us sometimes if we misbehave, but the way how they spanked us, some of them took out tire wheels and the tires thing, and they would whip you and whip you. Care. Well, I shouldn't say they don't care, but it was not the best way. And sometimes, we grew up not disciplining our children because we thought that our way of our parents disciplining us was not the right way. And it probably wasn't, but some of it was good, but it's the way how they went about it. It was not balanced, in other words. Just like politics, you are told to vote for the Dems, right? And you're told to vote for the Bs, all a bunch of nonsense, in my opinion. Yeah, but the thing about it is that if we were more, what should I say now, alert about what is happening in politics, I think that it could have worked for us. What has happened is that, Stephen, is that we have allowed the media, and we followed also our friends and family members, and they're Democrats for life, they're Republicans for life, they're PNM for life, they're UNC for life, and we just follow them. But if we were voting responsibly, I think that the system could have worked, but we weren't. So to some extent, the politicians cannot be blamed entirely. Just like the church can't be blamed entirely, the school system can't be blamed entirely if we were doing what we were supposed to do. Right? What if the parents would go to school and say, no, this is not the way I want my child. No child should learn that there's no difference between a man and a woman. If you think that there is none, keep it to yourself. But my child is not going to learn that, because the child is going to grow up confused, thinking that there's no difference between a man and a woman. And basic things that we know, basic value systems on which, all societies, and Slimy Show, all societies knew that there's a difference between a man and a woman. They don't have to change. The times don't change that. There are some truths that are self-evident and they will never change. It is what it is. Okay? How many people did Satan murder in the Bible? Well, you think Satan only murdered them, or did human beings murder them too, right? And how many people did Satan murder? Has he murdered right now, wherever you are? How many persons did he murder, Simon Show? Versus how many God offered, I would think. Who is the true demon? Now, one of the things that we have to understand, who are we property of? Who created us? God, right? Now, if we misbehaved, who do you think has the right to take life? Only God. Right? Only God. And look at why he took their lives. Look at why he took their lives. In fact, there are many people around now who will tell you, when they look at what is happening in society with the level of crime and violence, they say they want, what you call it now, they want people to be beheaded again. They want the what we call capital punishment, because people are tired. So there are times when humanity was really terrible. They would have killed you. When we look at what happened during the times of the flood and also Sodom and Gomorrah, the Bible says that there was nothing that was in their imagination that they would not do. So if they came to your house, Slimy Show, and they thought of killing you, they would have. Now, what if you had the majority of the world behaving like that? If they came to your house and they wanted to rape your daughter, they would do it. And God saw it, and he had to wipe out many of them. If he had not done that, they would have wiped out the world. So that is what you have to understand. And so we have to read and understand. So if he's all powerful and does nothing in this world, then maybe he's not all powerful. Now, when you say he does nothing, what do you mean? Who created the heavens and the earth, the universe, that of which, scientists are not even able to decipher? Even our neck of the universe, they can't decipher all the galaxies, and so you think that these things just came about? When you think about the innumerable, the numbers of the different species of animals, birds, cats, all of these things, you think that this came from an ordinary being? All right, you have to think. I think so. So we have, you tell me. So we have valid take. And then we have the brain needs to work, right? It does need to work, and we have to be able to exercise. You're enforcing the brainwashing, but I don't see anything here to suggest that you are very smart, Simon. Sure, you have to. You're not read. You're quoting scriptures, reading them out of context, which tells me that you don't understand what's going on. So we have, let's go on to, because Simon is saying nonsense. We have the flooded the earth and killed everyone, and all the citizens and all the babies. Your God did that. Okay, so what happened if he had not done that? Do you think the earth would have continued? Do you know, by the way, that our earth as it is now, if we continue on the same vein, we're going to cease to exist, aren't we? When we think about the nuclear weapons that these leaders have, at any given moment, they can destroy the entire world, right? And that is why sometimes God has to what? To put an end to what is happening, right? Because if he does not, then man is going to believe that he is the God, he is the creator, and he's doing whatever he wants to do. That is what is motivating Trump to do whatever he wants to do. He thinks that the United States should control this world, do with it whatsoever he will, right? And it's not only Trump, it's a system that controls him, and he's doing their bidding. And that's what we're saying here. Human beings can become very wicked, right, if they're not controlled by a higher being. Wicked. And that is what we're seeing happening now. They're killing people, and it's like nothing, like ball that they're throwing. And we get up every morning and we're, what is happening? What is happening to this world? Now, if you think that Andrew Holness or Donald Trump or Kamala Person-Bissessar is going to change what we have here, if you think that these guys are not connected to Scientology, as Annie was saying, they're not connected to, the New Age God, and they're not communicating with higher spirits or beings in the higher spiritual realm, I think that you are naive. Because if you go and read about Freemason, Illuminati, and all these New Age religions, you go and you read about what happens in Hollywood, which is to a lot of our musicians, you are going to see that they're wrapped up in very demonic stuff. And they're communicating with very dark spiritual beings. That many of them, if they do escape, they have told us that they were inspired by demons when they were singing whatever song that you love. New York, and you jump and you sing with them, and you think you're just having a wonderful time. And what you're really doing is worshiping, right? You're worshiping. So let's get our act together. I know this is a difficult topic. I am not here to preach to you, as some people think. I'm just here to say we have to have the difficult conversations. I'm not here to give you what you want, to tell you what you want to hear, to be a part of the political drama. Sometimes that is necessary because there is a time and place for everything. But we can't always be entertaining. We have to sometimes speak the uncomfortable truth. And the uncomfortable truth is that the Caribbean is plagued with mental illness, and people are losing hope. Now, where do they go for hope? They're not going to get it in the politicians. They're not going to even get it at the church. But they have to get it from a highly spiritual being. They need a sense of spirituality. And we're lacking that. And we're told that that is not necessary anymore. We're living in what you call it now, modern times. And I'm saying that the modern times is not helping because we are even more mentally diseased than in the older time, what you call ancient times. People were not going through, they were able to deal with the stresses that they were dealing with. Now we can't because our lives are so. Do you know, by the way, and I end here, I saw somebody in Jamaica, right? And they were talking about, they were showing on a video of times in the 1950s and 60s in Jamaica. And the roads look better in the 1950s and 60s in Jamaica. Ironic, right? Because we're living in modern times and they're building all these highways, right? So people commented and somebody said something which I thought was deep. She said, isn't it strange that the more we get developed here in Jamaica, our roads get worse. Our roads get worse. And that is ironic, but it's the truth. The more they're building these modern, the state-of-the-art highways, but the parochial roads are worse, in a worse condition than they were in yesteryear. The more they're building hospitals in Jamaica, is the worse our healthcare system gets. It is the irony of this modern world. And the more we think we are so, modern and we are progressive, is the worse humanity has become. Something is wrong, and it's something that you must reflect on. I know it's not comfortable to reflect on. I know we're not philosophical in this region, okay? But I have to pose these philosophical questions because they're necessary. They're necessary. And maybe they won't be watched today, but they will be watched tomorrow. Certainly they will. Now, Steve Knight is saying, now you see, when it comes to stories regarding flood, honestly, that is an act of Mother Nature. Well, is it only an act of Mother Nature? Who created nature? And that's what we have to ask. Who created nature? And that is what, if we think that nature just came in and of itself, and that then we think we can control it. But we can't control nature. Nature was made by someone, whomever you think that person was, but it was certainly created by that person, that creator. Joseph Jacks is saying that's Satan time. And we have Stephen saying, look at the people Sammy Davis Jr. and hanging around with. Do I have to question this man? Who's Sammy Davis? I'm not sure who Sammy Davis Jr. is. Good evening, Maria. Yeah, we're talking about, Maria, why are Caribbean youth losing faith, and are we paying the price for the lack of faith? I don't know what you think. Maybe you don't think that. Maybe you think something else. Something is happening. United States sees Haiti's main airport. That's Satan's job. Oh, I got what you're saying. Yeah. Well, the fact of the matter, remember now that the prime ministers and governments work with the devil because this is his kingdom. The devil says that this is his kingdom. All the kingdoms of the world belong to the devil, right? So he communicates with them, right? He communicates with them. And if you read what happens to many people who are in politics and some of them who have come out of it, you'll hear testimonies of them saying that they meet with the devil himself. Right? The Trumps of the world and these high beings, they meet with these people. And that is what they do things sometimes. And they believe they're doing it on God's behalf, but they're not doing it on behalf. They're doing it on behalf of the God of this world. Right? But this is where many people don't understand. They think that the governments of the world are just operating based. And you laugh when they do things, right? And you don't know that there are other higher forces that control them who can kill you in the split of a second. Right? Can kill you. And had it not been for the restraining power of God himself, our world would have collapsed a long time ago. Because the human beings can be evil. And when an evil force is combined with humanity, who are already evil, wow, what can they not do? And slavery was a result of that. Because slavery was rooted in worship of the slave master. He's your master, and you must worship him, right? And now they're telling us that, Trump and these people, that they are, they control the world, and we should worship them because they want to free us. But do they want to free us, or do they want to enslave us. Now, Caribbean people, we take everything that comes from the United States. So we copy this sort of secular, and we've copied this sort of hedonistic worldview. And we're going to pay, we're already paying the price, but we're going to pay heavily for just following without questioning, asking the hard questions. Thank you so much for joining, and I hope that you will share this live, because this is the channel in which we pose very hard questions, uncomfortable, but they need to be posed. Not something I wanted to talk about, but something I had to address. All the best to you. See you tomorrow. Hope you enjoy the rest of the night.